Washington Post editorial board has a new piece entitled "Georgia is Turning Purple and Should Be a 2024 Early Primary State." It writes in part, quote, "Former President Donald Trump saddled Republicans with this nominee, despite widespread warnings that Mr. Walker was unelectable. Mr. Trump deserves as much blame as anyone for his party's failure to win back the Senate. Historical trends and the national environment should have made it easier. The runoff results add to the evidence that the Peach State has turned purple. Georgia, with 11 million residents and 16 electoral votes, is becoming, in American politics, what Ohio and Florida used to be, a genuinely competitive battleground. A primary win in Georgia would send a signal that a candidate has broad appeal and ultimately that they would be a credible contender as a party's standard bearer in the 2024 general election." It's so interesting because what Trump has done has maybe created this scenario. What do you think of the editorial, Mara Gay? Because this, I feel, was more, as Steve pointed out, was more about Trump, even for people who were not for Joe Biden and traditionally would vote Republican. They just couldn't vote for this candidate.
That's true. I think there's another story, and it's a good news story that we haven't talked enough about, which, you know, we come on the show, we talk so much about the threats to democracy, and rightly so, but there's another current in the United States, which is the continued democratization of the country. And you see that actually happening in Georgia in a really exciting way, where a coalition, a multiracial coalition, for the first time since Reconstruction, is making it possible to have competitive elections. And that is a really exciting thing. I mean, you have to go back to, Raphael Warnock thinking about this in history. He's one of only 11 black senators that have ever served in the U.S. Senate. That began with Hiram Revels from Mississippi in 1870, who who fought in the Battle of Vicksburg. So you have to go back that far. And so I think when you think about Georgia, you have to also think about who was voting in this coalition. You have moderate white Republicans, moderate voters. You have conservatives who didn't like the Republican candidate. You have a third of the electorate, black voters, showing up in large numbers. And then you have in Raphael Warnock somebody who shared a pulpit that Martin Luther King Jr. used to preach from. So, overall, this is actually an exciting trend because, democracy is still alive and well, and I think lives to fight another day. So that the idea that we would focus on Georgia, I have to agree with my colleagues in D.C. It makes sense.
It has to be underlined, that link to history, that Raphael Warnock is the preacher at the same pulpit where Martin Luther King stood for so many years, and now he's the first black man or woman to serve a full term as a seat in the state of Georgia, a state of Lester Maddox and segregation and all the history that came before that. This is politically very important, but it's also an important day for history.
Yeah, and we talked about Herschel Walker's speech, but I mean, watching Raphael Warnock in his victory speech, he's really come along, too. I mean, he's really found his voice, and what an incredible night